evening. The history of Milpitas is brought to you by Wells Fargo Bank, Milpitas Cleaners, and Wildlife Sporting Goods.
This is Channel 6. We now start our local cablecasting. So sit back and enjoy local programming from Channel 6, teleprompter cable TV.
I'd like to welcome you to our night with the history of Milpitas. I'm Anita Garlick, president of the Milpitas Beautification Committee, and I'm just so tickled to see this many people here, especially some of the younger folks. And to get right on with everything, I'd like to introduce Mort Lamine, who will be our moderator for this evening. Mort?
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very privileged to moderate this panel tonight, and for a number of reasons. It's a tremendous thing to get reacquainted with many of the people who have been so close to the growth and the evolution of Milpitas, many of whom are in the audience as well as our panel, over the past decades. So we're indeed fortunate to have people here tonight who can fill us in on the community as it was. Prime among our guests is the county's historian, a scholar, an able lecturer, and certainly Mr. History of Santa Clara County, Clyde Arbuckle. And we're fortunate to have Mr. Arbuckle's left, Frank Cuciz, longtime Milpitan, rancher, and very knowledgeable about the area. Next to him, Joe Simas, who has been on his own the unofficial historian of Milpitas, collecting, preserving, and reminding us of the history of the community. And on his left, Jack Sepulveda, whose family traces back to the very beginnings of California, and of course, who knows intimately the history of this community. So,
my family is 6 generations in California. My great-grandfather was Jose Maria de Alviso. He was the son of Ignacio Alviso, who came up with the Anza. He was born in 1798 in Santa Clara Valley. His son Jose Maria acquired what's now Rancho Milpitas and was known at one time as Rancho San Miguel. And in designating, and it's the old abstract, designating all the boundaries of the Rancho Milpitas in here, many times it's referred to as the Rancho San Miguel. And then underneath, as parentheses, it says Rancho Milpitas. My father, an only son, when he was a young man, his mother approached Samuel Ayers, who was one of the old-time county supervisors, and asked for permission to build a saloon at the corner of Piedmont and Calaveras Road. So he built a saloon called The Last Chance. And the idea of it is because in these hills at one time, that's where your wood choppers used to chop the wood and carry it into San Jose to be burned. And my father, in his stories, and part of this is probably romance, but I take it about it for facts, and he said that hardly ever a wood chopper ever got as far as San Jose. Because adjacent to his Last Chance, there was a blacksmith. So the woodcutters coming from the hills in their wagons with the wood would stop at the Last Chance Saloon to have a drink to refresh themselves before they took the dusty road to San Jose. And normally they had no money. So before they left there, they unstacked the wood and stacked it behind his saloon, and he gave them a few dollars, and before they got any further, they were back up to the hills to cut wood again. And what wood he didn't get, the blacksmith got. And my father used to acquire from the blacksmith because every time he put a shoe on a horse, he came up to have a drink. So that is the refreshing of some of the people, or the old-timers that worked back into the hills in the back. And I understand all these hills at one time were wooded. and they were low. That's one of the reasons you have them, a lot of them real bare now, for the simple reasons that where a lot of the wood come from to go into San Jose to be cut.
Did you ever hear your people speak about it?
No, and I lived across the street from it. But I would like to remind you fellas that I realize that I'm too young for the good things that happened in the early days when I didn't get to fight the Indians and I didn't come in on the grants. I had to buy mine. So, you did? Glad I didn't. But I did see the growth of Milpitas from 1917 to today. A quaint little town. I think it took in the township, as Mr. Arbuckle stated, and I think we had about 500 people, more or less, give 5 or less. And it's grown to today. We are a mad comparison. Then I can recall the little, this is not probably history, but it's some of the things that happened in this community. The little corn patches from where it got its name to little pea patches and, pea patches and potatoes. And this become one of the finest things that happened in the community. They could grow this stuff and take it into the cities where they're in the San Francisco, Oakland, where they were hungry for vegetables, and this made it quite a factor for this community. They took this stuff and all they could raise would go up there and get well taken care of and well compensated and paid for. As I can recall, this community was one of the biggest pea growing areas in the state. And I can recall where 70 to 80 carloads of peas would go out to the East Coast and waypoints from here.
I think it would be important for some of the people to really know, I think your present boundaries in the city of Milpitas actually encompass today what is now the city of Milpitas, except for the Telecitas Ranch, which goes up to the county line. My great-grandfather received, it says here, Jose Castro, governor of the territory of California, under the colonization laws of the Republic of Mexico, which said grant bears the date September 28, 1835, and October the 2nd, 1835, received 4,457 acres and 66 hundredths. Now, my grandmother, Maria Alviso, her daughter, she was married twice, my great-grandmother. She was married to a fellow by the name of Eurydius at a later date after Alviso. And the little road going up to the hills off of Piedmont was the little road they called Eurydius. And that was named after him. Now, he was a very smart man, and it is said that at one time he studied in the monasteries in Spain. He was brought over here to help educate the children, and he married this rich widow right after her husband died. And he was able to get her to transfer lots of the land over to him, into his name. And at a later date, this is where all the suits occurred, because the children sued the mother to acquire the estate that they thought that they had from their fathers. And this went on for over 20 years. My grandmother was fortunate enough that she refused to enter into litigation with her sisters and her brothers. And so she derived from her mother and her stepfather 320 acres beyond the rest of the land. Today I'm living on 15 and 49/100ths of that acreage. When he died in 1853, his estate was valued, now remember I'm telling you, around 5,000 acres, plus cattle, plus horses. His estate was valued at $100,000. But they couldn't raise enough money to even pay the taxes. Much of this land was lost through taxes. And all this record here shows a continuation of nothing but tax from 1853 to 1900. Somewhere or another, the father didn't want the daughter to marry, rather the stepfather, and the mother didn't want the daughter to marry beneath her, so they said no, they couldn't get married. So it's said that he stole one night, come out on horseback. My grandmother climbed out the window. She got away from her dueña, climbed out the window. They took off on horseback and were married. Later on, the old man relented and accepted them into the family. But strange enough, as a young fellow, I remember there was still that break between my grandmother and my grandfather. There was always a kind of a look down even though they were man and wife. She was always the boss. She was the one that whatever was left, it was hers and not his. And so it's that's one of the stories of those days. And she also, my father used to tell me of the stories, or my grandfather, in fact, used to tell me the stories that when they went to church, they used to get in these carretas, and they're all wooden, and they'd have the oxen, and they'd leave the ranch up here, or the adobe up here, and it took them 4 to 6 hours to go to Santa Clara. And the Indians used to go ahead cutting the mustard stalks. And then the men rode horsebacks. The men never walked. They always had the horses. And the women rode in the carts. And they were always put in such a way that the other men didn't look at them too much. And they'd take them 4 to 5 hours to go to church and come back. Now when the Americans came to this area, the story goes that my grandfather would immediately send all the girls down to the basement. And the girls were never brought out while the soldiers were here, or while the Fremont or some of these men were here. At the Adobe House, it is also said that some of your great bandits, or I won't say great bandits, but some of the most notorious bandits, or the most historical bandits in the state of California, have ate, changed horses there, received fresh mounts, and went on to their business. My grandfather once told me of the Battle of the Mustard. Do you remember you've heard of the Battle of the Mustard? He told me a story once, I guess I was about 6 or 7 years old. And he told me the Battle of the Mustards, and of course, my grandfather and my grandfather could talk English, and he could understand English, but he wouldn't speak it with an English or with an American. He always referred to the Americans as gringo. And my grandmother could understand it, but they never talked it. And they always would listen and have the Americans all talk about it, what they wanted to say, and then after something they didn't like, then they'd answer them in English. That's about the only thing they did. They'd just tell them in English they didn't like it. But my grandfather told of the Battle of the Mustards, and he said that the early Californians at that particular time, when your Americans first came in here, the Spaniards here, or the Mexicans, as you want to say, they were very friendly people. There was one thing that they did not do. They very seldom exploited the land. The Indians always lived on their ranches. They were fed, clothed, and taken care of. People that traveled received horses and food, all free of charge. And it is said that at the old adobe up there, any man that entered that adobe asked for a night's lodging. He received the night's lodging, and there always was a candle and a plate at the side of the bed, and there was a gold piece there. And it was a custom in those days that he never took the gold piece unless he needed it on his travels. Now, at the Battle of the Mustards, my grandfather says that the Americans coming out here, the first thing they did was try to disarm the Californians, and they took the horses, the best horses they had. So he said at the Battle of the Mustards there was a cannon. And the Californians used lances, knives, and spears. And they rode their horses. And the biggest feat was there when they lassoed the cannon. Was that right, Clyde? They lassoed the cannon, but after they recovered the cannon from the Americans, they had nothing to shoot it. They didn't have no bullets. They had no balls to shoot it with the cannonball. But this is just, today I'm just trying to tell you, is a little bit of the old romance of those days. Because today, when you look around at the modern world, sometimes, like me, sometimes I feel like I like to look back at the past and see how happy, and how congenial, how friendly, and how these people live. And then try to compare them to the way we live with one another today. Yeah, that's it. And it's not, you can't understand it. They say that civilization or education puts people up on high planes, makes them live better together, and understand one another better. But here were people who were just simple. In this book, many of them just signed their names with a cross. And so it's amazing me many times with the history that how we live today compared to those people. Now they danced, they ate, they drank, they had a good time. Everything was good time with them. And everybody around had a good time. Americans, everybody came to the hacienda up there and they all enjoyed themselves. Nobody was denied a thing.
I might add, the apparatus you see, with a big eye staring at me, is channel 6, the cable television in Milpitas, teleprompter cable. They are going to broadcast this. I don't know when. Is there anything?
We don't know when either.
We don't know when. But read it in the Milpitas Post. We'll have a listing, okay? We both get a plug out of that. Okay. We have some questions for our panel.
In the early days, with travel so difficult, what did people do for medical attention? And what was the first? Who was the first doctor in Milpitas?
There was a Dr. Brown.
At a hospital.
Dr. Brown, he was right there before Dr. Smith, R.J. Smith.
Yeah.
He was what he called a country doctor.
Is that across from the old city hall?
No, right there, he was where the A&W root beer is first. And that building was remodeled in 22, the same as the year that the place you got was remodeled. The Jacomatas, a guy named Nielsen remodeled in 22.
Did Milpitas have a doctor as long back as you can remember, Joe?
He filled out the prescriptions and everything. You go there, he'd give you a prescription, 50 cents or $1. He'd go through the bottles there, and
I might say this. My boy is a historian of our family, and he's followed all the way back. And I was just trying to think, was it Townsend or Corey? Dr. Corey.
Yeah. Corey
was the doctor that took care of my grandfather in 1853 when he was dying.
Benjamin Corey.
Benjamin Corey.
Yeah, Benjamin Corey.
Dr. Corey was a legal voting resident of San Jose at what would now be the 400 block. The house stood there, built in 1864. But Corey was the first physician to settle in Santa Clara County.
First doctor in Santa Clara.
He arrived here in San Jose on December 1st, 1847. And his practice immediately extended from San Jose to Monterey on the south and Martinez on the north. He covered it by horseback. When you called the doctor in those days, you didn't necessarily get the reply, give him an aspirin, we'll call you up in the morning and see if he's alive. But if you'll permit, Mr. Levine, I'll tell one story on Dr. Corey. I can't sit down. I'll never make a member of a board of directors. Corey, in the pursuit of his profession, one evening was called out to Alviso to attend to an ailing farmer. At the conclusion of his visit, as Corey was about to mount his horse, the farmer's wife gave to him a large sweet potato. It had been grown in that rich alluvium. Corey's saddlebags were full, his satchel was full, so he couldn't carry he couldn't put the sweet potato into any of those receptacles. So he rode along, holding the reins in one hand and the sweet potato was in the other hand. Now, Corey was an excellent singer. He had a preference for hymns within the Sweet By and By as his favorite. Sometimes he was called the singing doctor, sometimes he was called the Sweet By and By doctor by the Californians, the Spanish Californians. On this particular evening, however, as he rode along, he was singing a brand new song. It came upon the midnight clear. The midnight wasn't quite clear. Now and then a big white cumulus would float over the moon, casting a few acres of shadow on any particular spot. Just as Corey crossed the outskirts into San Jose, singing away, it came upon the midnight clear. One of these clouds obscured the moonlight, and the shadowy figures simultaneously stepped out from some bushes alongside the road, muttering whatever the equivalent to the modern "this is a stick-up, buddy" happened to be at that time. Corey cut his song short, surprised, holding the reins and still holding on to the sweet potato. About that time, the clouds started to clear, the light increased, and the shadowy figure of the man down on the road sort of scrooched down a little and kind of looked up there, and suddenly he wheeled about and dived back into the bushes from which he'd emerged. Corey thought the man was crazy, until, looking down at his right hand, there he was, holding this sweet potato in the manner of a pistol. Now, plainly, the would-be hold-up man wished nothing to do with anyone so fast on the draw. So, the story continues. Corey rode the rest of the way home, patting the sweet potato and singing, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow."
Has the name always been Milpitas, and what does it mean? And what efforts were made to change the name over the years past?
Well, there are a lot of versions of that name. It means, they say little cornfields. The Spanish say it's milpa is a farm.
Well, see, in the early days, they grew a lot of wheat, a lot of maize, and
corn.
what you see, San Jose was supposed to be the city, and so some of the farmers then used to have small vegetable gardens, and Milpitas used to grow out here parts of the vegetables that were taken into San Jose and shipped to the Presidio in San Francisco, and so you had little patches all out here, and they were all green. So there's many variations. I've heard some people say, well, it means little and this and that, but it's always come down to me from my ancestors that it meant many little patches of maize or things of that kind. Milpas, and then pitas, farms. See, little small patches. And that's what they always used to say. Now, as I say, you hear many versions. Probably Clyde's got a different one yet.
I think he has. The ethnologists tell us that Milpitas comes from an Aztec word of the Nahuatl dialect. Milpa is correct on the corn patch. If we wish to be disgustingly and pedantically correct, the same people tell us that it means a patch for seed corn. And then the ita, milpa is the Aztec word. The ita is a Spanish diminutive, meaning little, or patches. See, instead of saying a big cornfield, it's a patches. So if we believe the ethnologists, we find that it's a combination of Aztec and Spanish word.
What would it take for Milpitas to eventually buy or own the adobe on Piedmont Road and make it into a historical museum?
That's a good question. It wouldn't take too much because I'm very much in favor that either the county, the city, or the state should get this and preserve it.
Make a national.
And I wouldn't stand in its way. It's been preserved. Pop worked it over from, well, practically in the deterioration stage, and spent considerable money years ago, in 1926, I think, and repaired it to its original, as near as original as he could. However, it's a far cry from that today. I might add and clarify this one thing that he's done for us that I dislike. It's all boarded up now, and there's a very good reason for it. You couldn't call Pop crazy for doing this. People would always come by and take pictures, and for a time he was proud of doing that and let them even take a snapshot of him along with it. But people are funny. They were coming around and getting to the door and talking to them, and pretty soon they'd get the foot in the door like all salesmen and everybody else, and they'd want to get in and take a peek and see everything else, and they just didn't like to get that disturbed and didn't feel people had that privilege and didn't want to be disturbed, in fact. So he just thought, and another thing, he got the idea they were commercializing the pictures, and he wasn't getting a franchise or a cut or something. Being dollar-minded, he didn't like it. So he just got the bright idea that he'd board it up, and if you did take a picture of it, it isn't authentic, and this is all he cares. You haven't got a picture.
No.
May I elaborate a little bit here, Mort?
Sure.
You see, originally, these adobe houses, I told you, they were further out. They were more up toward what people around here know either as, at one time we used to call it the Bassett Ranch, which was the Murphy, originally was the Martin Murphy Ranch, and now is Parktown. And my father was born over on what is the Murphy Ranch up on a little hill at the end of Landis Avenue above Piedmont Road on the hill there.
The Bortola?
In 1860.
The Bortola?
No, my father. My grandfather was born in San Jose.
Yeah.
But the reason the adobe house moved as it was, that you see, in that time there was water abundance in many years in Santa Clara Valley. There was artesian wells. You could go anywhere. There's water bubbling out of the ground, and so they always stayed away. They wouldn't come down here in Milpitas because that was flooded all the time. The Coyote was always flooding it, and there was water all over the place. So that's the reason you find that the adobe houses were all up toward the hill up here, and that's the reason they built there. But the first ones they built were further out yet. But as water become a little scarcer, they begin to move closer to where the water was. So eventually they ended up where they did now, which is sometimes, as Frank will tell you, sometimes the house gets flooded from the little Royacucci.
The Portuguese immigrants who came into this country have helped to build it up almost beyond our wildest imagination. And I'd like to know a little more, Joe, about the Portuguese people in this area.
Well, they came here around, the sharecroppers came here around in the 70s. First the Irish came to Milpitas, then the English, and they came from Canada and Ireland, and then the whalers, they jumped boat. My father was jump boat in Frisco, and my grandfather in New York.
Were these islanders, Azore Islanders?
They came from the Azores, most of those. And they'd come over here, then somebody else would send for a brother, and they start farming up here. Sometimes they'd batch together. Like Vic Silvera's father, him and another guy named Fields batched, they were 18, 19 years old. Well, most of those guys couldn't read or write, and they'd farm a little potatoes. And one of the first ones to come here was Joe Enos Pedro. That's Ray Madruga's great-grandfather. And he farmed up in Downing Ranch. He had 9 children, 5 girls and 4 boys. There's only one living. That's Mrs. Bell Smith. That's the ex-fire chief's mother. She's about 88. She went to the Laguna School. She knew his grandfather, Gordon.
She knew some of the other family, too, the rest of the family.
And she went to Laguna. And then they came from different islands, from mostly San Miguel. And from the Pico, they were the whalers. And from Payal, they were the farmers. So Kirtner had 8,000 acres from Henry Kirtner from there at Warm Springs, where he make the turn of highway to Jacqueline Road. And he sold the front to these farmers, 20 acres, 10 at a time, and they paid him off, see? And he kept the hills in the back. That's Henry Kirtner. He hit Frisco with $20 in his pocket. He was an orphan, and he would work for a fellow named Beardsley, and he was supposed to buy him a suit of clothes and pay him so much and send him to school, but they never. But in those days, you had to sign up for a year or so. So he went on his own, and he bought the first piece of property here between Alvarado and Centerville. And he was an orphan. He was the 9th child. He was born in Indiana in 1831. And he came to Warm Springs, and he settled there, and he had Arthur, Adolph, Harpy, and William, and there was one more. And they had land in Hollister, Sunnyvale, and all these sharecroppers came in there a year later, the Downing and the Kirtner Ranch. There was about 30 families up in the Downing and about 25 up there. And they all had 10, 12 children. And they all done their work, picked the peas, corn. So speaking, they couldn't read or write. So my mother wrote their letters. Some of these young fellas would come over here and leave their girlfriends behind. Well, they were 20, 21, they'd get a letter from their girlfriend, they couldn't read it. So they'd come over to my mother, she could read Portuguese, and she'd write them a letter, and I used to get a kick out of them. She'd write their love letters. And when they write their love letters, then they'd send for their girlfriends, and they'd get married. My mother'd get a picture. I had a bunch of them. Then they'd have children. I didn't know who half of them was. So I gave them to whoever I could find their grandchildren or somebody. I'd give that. I had a box full of them. And then when the sharecroppers all started to go away, they all bought 10 acres, 20 acres. They had a little money, and their families were raised. And they walked to school. And when you was in the 4th grade, that was your schooling. You had to pick peas, corn, and all that stuff. Then they'd go work in the hay presses, thrashing machines, when the crops was farmed. The other girls would go cut cots. Then they'd go far away. They'd go pick apples at Wassonville, a bunch of them, when the season was over. And they made it. They come down to the store. They got credit. They loaded up the 4 or 5 sacks of flour, potatoes, beans, all credit. When they'd get $100, they'd come and pay the store man. He'd tell them, if you needed this money to buy seed, come after it. He'd tell them that. And he never lost nothing.
Yeah, I want to say a little bit. one of the things we probably missed here at one time, the city of Milpitas one time was a big canning industry was here.
Yeah.
California,
CPC?
Del Monte or whatever you had a big cannery right where on the other.
Dr. Curlin.
Yeah, well, yeah, by Dr. Curlin in there. They had a big cannery.
Yeah.
And at that particular time, pretty near everything that would be below where I live today, all what you call Parktown and Lamont subdivision in there,
And up here?
and all through in here, was all in peas.
Peas.
And they used to bring Hindus in that used to pick them.
That was the sweet peas.
Yeah, and they
They
used
had
to
a seed ranch.
Well, they had a seed ranch too.
Kibble and seed.
Yeah, but they had Kimball and Seed had a ranch, and they also grew peas and
Yeah.
thrashed them down here at the cannery.
Yeah.
And the farmers used to come in and just hold them. They'd be lined up all with their wagons down here, unloading their peas down here for the cannery.
Yeah.
Mort, can I just tell a little humorous story on my grandparents?
Don't violate any confidences.
Geez, I'm afraid I'll be telling you some of the family secrets. Well, my grandfather, like a lot of Spaniards, he used to like to have a drink, and they used to have the horses, and so they used to have 2 or 3 buggy horses that my grandmother used to go to town and to go to San Jose to do her shopping. At that particular time, and you'll probably remember now what I'm talking about, they used to be down here where Saul is, the old Peugeot, you know, they had a saloon there.
They had a watering trough.
Yeah, and a watering trough. And then down what you people wouldn't know, but Clyde will know, there was such a place down here they used to call Wayne Station after old man Wayne.
Jerry O'Brien.
Yeah, and where Jerry O'Brien, the former county tax assessor, used to live.
Yeah.
And in fact, he appraised our land when my grandparents died.
Yeah.
But anyhow, there was a saloon there. And then down at Maginnie Corners on 13th and Street, where today is the big storage ice out, across the street there was another saloon there.
Buckhorn.
And
The Buckhorn.
So my grandfather, he used to leave the ranch, you know, and he always had to go to town to do something. And he'd, I remember sometimes I'd small and I'd go with him. But anyhow, first place he landed up was at Peugeot's. And he'd take the horse and throw the reins down and he'd go in and have a drink. Well, maybe 5, 10 minutes, he'd come out, and we'd go down, we'd hit Wayne Station, stop again. We'd go down to Maginnie's, he stopped again.
He had to water the horse.
He always was watering the horse, you know. But here's where the joke comes in, you know. My grandmother, afterwards, she got so she wouldn't let him take that particular horse. Because every time she went to town, he stopped at all the saloons. And she had to get out. And every saloon, she had to get out of the buggy and lead the horse by for about a half a block so he'd go by the saloon. So you can imagine what happened to my grandfather when he got home or when she got home.
Who's going to take the responsibility of finding the right home for those pictures?
I believe that the city has some fantastic archives. And they have quite a few things that have been stuck down there until we get some nice historical society to take over. And I'm sure that the city would be more than happy to take your photographs and hold them and keep them in good shape until such time that a historical society. I think at one time we started to have one, and it got left by the wayside somewhere. And I would love to see, maybe from this evening or something, somebody get interested again and we could get going on this and do something about it. But the city will, by all means, take care of it.
There is a vault in this building where that kind of material is being kept, Carl. And the city manager would be happy, or Bill Smith would be happy to accommodate you.
That again, please. I didn't get that. I was listening to Joe.
I asked on my question, what would it take to get the property that you live in now to make it a historical society site? What would the requirements would be?
The main thing right now is that Mother and Dad are still alive, and I don't want to usher them out of there until they're out. Then they'll commence deciding what to do. As of now, I wouldn't do a thing with it.
No, I don't blame you, Frank.
Frank, is it possible that through their will or something like that, some kind of arrangement can be made, or some kind of life estate arrangement which perhaps would free them of the tax burden as long as they remain in it, or something like that?
Well,
has any there's some precedence for this, and maybe Clyde would also.
Not necessarily. I mean, they're well up in age now, and they're getting, so as I said before, they don't want to be bothered, so we will be the next owners, and therefore start from there on out.
I think there is a need for a historical society. Hate to sound like a broken record, but about 10 years ago, I think it was this month, another meeting was held, I think at the old City Hall, and we said the same thing then, that there's...
10 years ago.
Right. And the tapes, by the way, of that meeting are still on file in the vault here at City Hall. Those of you who are interested in the historical aspects of the community and in the work particularly of the Milpitas Beautification Committee are urged to sign up on the guest lists on the table along the wall. And I certainly want to thank our panel for an extremely interesting and provocative evening.